On the morning of my wedding, I found a note in my dressing room, "Don't do it. He's not who you think," signed by his ex-girlfriend. I thought it was a prank. Until 5 hours later, he left me at the altar with no explanation. Everyone said I should move on. Instead, I dug into the past and uncovered the secret that made him run. There are moments in life that split you in two, before the note and after the note. Mine came on a warm October morning, hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. My hair was half curled. My makeup artist was still fussing over my lashes. My maid of honor, Kaya, had just popped a bottle of Prosecco for the bridesmaids when the note arrived, tucked inside an envelope with no return address, no name, just my full name, written in precise cursive, Savannah Grace Ellison. At first, I thought it was a card, a sweet message, maybe from my future husband, Josh. He'd always been sentimental that way, or at least, he used to be. But when I opened it, I felt the world tip sideways. Don't do it. He's not who you think. He's lying to you. Please, don't marry him. M. My fingers trembled. My first instinct was to laugh like this was some tasteless joke, maybe from one of Josh's college buddies who thought cold feet were hilarious. But the handwriting was feminine, slanted, delicate, and the way she wrote "please" felt desperate. M. The only M I could think of was Madeline, Josh's ex-girlfriend, the one he dated for 2 years before me, the one he claimed went a little off the rails after they broke up. I sat there in the white robe the bridal boutique gave me, fake lashes halfway done, my heart pounding like it wanted to run away before I even stood up. Kaya noticed something was off. She put down her glass, crossed the room, and gently pulled the note from my hand. She read it once, twice. Then she looked at me, serious. "What do you want to do?" I didn't know. Call Josh? Pretend I never saw it? Demand answers? Instead, I did what I've always done when things don't make sense. I compartmentalized. I folded the note neatly, slipped it into my clutch, and forced a smile. "I'm getting married," I said. "Let's not let some jealous ex ruin my day." But Kaya looked unconvinced. And if I'd really paid attention to the way her brow furrowed as she nodded, maybe I would have realized the truth sooner. 3 hours later, I stood at the end of the aisle, bouquet in hand, the string quartet playing our song, 117 guests rising to their feet in anticipation. And Josh? Josh never showed up. He left me there, in front of everyone, with mascara running down my face and 1,000 unspoken questions echoing in the silence. At first, we thought maybe he was just late. It wasn't like Josh to be careless with time. He was the guy who showed up 10 minutes early to everything, even coffee dates. But as the minutes dragged on, and the music started to loop, whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Kaya stepped in quickly, whispering something to the wedding planner, who rushed toward the groomsmen. I just stood there, like a doll propped up in a storefront window. My veil pinned perfectly, my dress fitted just so, my hands locked in a death grip around my bouquet. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. When the string quartet finally stopped playing, the silence became deafening. I saw Josh's best man, Tyler, pacing near the arbor, his phone pressed to his ear. Then came the look, the one that told me everything before he even said a word. A look of helplessness, of panic. Kaya came back to me, gently placed a hand on my arm, and said quietly, "He's not answering." That was the first crack. The next hour was a blur of murmurs, apologies, and awkward shuffling, as guests were led toward the reception area under the guise of refreshments, while we sort through a delay. People tried to talk to me. I don't remember a word they said. I was escorted into the bridal suite again, where I immediately ripped off my veil and sat frozen in front of the vanity mirror. My reflection didn't look like me. It looked like a ghost of someone who still believed in happy endings. And then Kaya, my ride or die since high school, pulled a chair in front of me and said in a low, calm voice, "Sav, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but I don't think he just got cold feet. I think this is something else." I didn't say anything. She reached into my clutch, pulled out the note, and held it between us. "You got this today," she said. This wasn't some coincidence. Someone knew he wasn't gonna show up. The pieces were there. I just couldn't look at them yet. My brain was trying to shield me from the collapse of everything I thought I knew, but my gut had started whispering something dark, something I couldn't ignore. Josh didn't just leave me at the altar. He ran, and I needed to know what or who he was running from. The morning after the non-wedding, I woke up in my childhood bedroom with a migraine blooming behind my eyes and a pit in my stomach so heavy I thought it might never lift. My mom had insisted I come home with her. Not because she was controlling or overbearing. She's actually the opposite, the soft-spoken kind who carries heartbreak in silence and makes pancakes for pain she doesn't know how to fix. She kept looking at me like I was glass, fragile, shattered. Kaya stayed too, slept on the floor in leggings and one of my old college sweatshirts. She hadn't stopped moving since the ceremony fell apart, answering texts, canceling vendors, fielding questions from confused friends and family. Meanwhile, I had curled into a ball under the floral duvet I hadn't used since high school and tried to remember how to breathe. When I finally got up, it was Kaya who handed me a steaming mug of coffee and said gently, "You ready?" I shook my head. She handed me my phone anyway. 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, 28 unread texts, none of them from Josh. I didn't know what I was expecting. An explanation? An apology? A sign that I hadn't just been discarded like yesterday's headlines? But there was nothing, just silence. Until I opened my email. Subject line, "You deserve to know the truth. Sender MadelineCarmail.com. I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen. Kaya leaned over my shoulder. "Is that his ex?" I whispered. I clicked. The email was short. No frills. Just 3 lines. "I'm sorry to do this like this. I tried warning you. There are things you don't know about Josh. Dangerous things. He lied to me. He's lying to you too. Call me if you want the truth. I'll be waiting." Underneath was a phone number with a New York area code. Kaya's mouth was already open. "You're not seriously thinking of—" "I have to," I said, cutting her off. My voice was hoarse, barely audible but steady. Because suddenly, I remembered the odd little moments that hadn't made sense. Like the locked drawer in his home office he never let me open. Or the calls he'd step outside to take, claiming it was work. Or the night I woke up to find him gone, only to have him claim he'd gone for a drive to clear his head when he returned at 3 a.m. with dirt on his shoes. At the time, I didn't press. Because love is a funny thing. It teaches you to swallow secrets like they're sugar, to smooth over the rough edges and call it trust. But now I wanted answers. I picked up my phone, and I dialed. It rang twice. Then a woman's voice answered, calm and low. "Savannah?" My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't said a word, hadn't even introduced myself, but somehow, she knew. "Yes," I whispered. There was a pause on her end. The kind that says, "I've been waiting for this moment, but I hate that we're both here." "Thank you for calling," she said. "I wasn't sure you would." Madeline Carr. The girl whose name had only ever come up in stories, always framed as clingy, dramatic, and conveniently left in the past. She was supposed to be the reason Josh had walls, not the person standing on the other side of them. I cleared my throat. "You sent the note." "I did." "Why?" Another silence. Then she said softly, "Because he left me too." And I thought if someone had warned me back then, maybe I wouldn't have spent years trying to make sense of someone who never deserved my loyalty. I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't ready to hear I wasn't special, that the same pattern had played out before me. "Look," she continued, "I don't want to overwhelm you. But Josh, he's not just a guy with commitment issues. He lies, he manipulates, and when he thinks he's about to be caught, he runs." I could feel my heart thudding like it wanted to break free of my chest. "I need you to be more specific," I said. "Because I'm sitting here in a wedding dress that never made it to the aisle. And I don't even know what I'm grieving right now, a man or a ghost." Madeline let out a shaky breath. "You're grieving a story he told you," she said. "The version of himself he wanted you to love. But that man doesn't exist." I wanted to argue, to defend him. But the lump in my throat said she was telling the truth. Then she said something I'll never forget. "I stayed with him for 3 years, Savannah." I ignored the lies, the secrets, the drawer full of IDs with different names. I didn't ask questions when he changed jobs suddenly or deleted entire text threads in front of me. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was lucky he chose me. My whole body went cold. IDs? Deleted messages? I hadn't seen that. Not exactly, but I'd felt it. That undercurrent of something's off, always explained away by his charm. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know who I'd almost married. After I hung up with Madeline, I just sat there, staring at the call log, like it might rewrite itself. Like maybe if I blinked hard enough, I'd see a different name on the screen. A different story. But her voice lingered. 3 years, a drawer full of IDs, deleted texts, a man who disappeared the moment someone got too close to the truth. Josh wasn't just emotionally unavailable. He was hiding something. And now, I couldn't unknow that. By afternoon, Kaya and I were back at the townhouse Josh and I had shared. Technically, it was his place bought in his name before we met, but we'd lived there together for over a year. My clothes were still in the closet. My books lined the shelves. My toothbrush still sat in the holder next to his. The silence when we stepped inside was thick, stale air, closed blinds. The kind of stillness that tells you no one's been home in a while. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Kaya asked, hovering by the door. I nodded. I didn't feel brave. I felt nauseous. But the thing about betrayal is that it leaves you starving for closure, for clarity, for something real in the wreckage. So I went straight to his office. Same mahogany desk, same sleek laptop sitting closed on the surface. And that same drawer, the bottom right one, still locked, just like it had always been. I'd asked about it once, months ago. He'd said it was just some old tax stuff, and he'd lost the key. I hadn't pressed. Because when you love someone, you trust them. But love makes you blind. And I was done being blind. I pulled open the other drawers first. Loose papers, pens, receipts, normal stuff. But the locked drawer taunted me. Like a secret it knew I wasn't ready for. Kaya appeared behind me. "Try this," she said, holding up a small silver key she'd found in a side drawer. I slipped it in. It turned. Click. Inside there was a black zippered pouch, thick with documents. Beneath it, a flash drive. And tucked underneath that, a passport. I pulled it out slowly. And froze. It wasn't Josh's name on the passport. It was Nathaniel West. Same photo. Same face. Different life. I looked up at Kaya, my hand shaking. "What the hell is going on?" I whispered. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about heartbreak. It was about identity. And whatever Josh or Nathaniel was hiding, it wasn't just personal, it was criminal. I stared at the passport like it might blink first. Nathaniel West, born in Oregon, issued 3 years ago. A completely different name. Same birthday, same photo, same man who once kissed my forehead while I was falling asleep on his chest, promising me a future, a family, forever. Kaya stood behind me, barely breathing. This can't be real," she whispered. But it was. The edges were worn, the pages stamped. It wasn't some fake souvenir or prop. This was a real identity. One I had never seen. One I was never meant to. I set the passport aside and opened the black zippered pouch. Inside was a stack of documents, some banking statements, rental agreements, travel receipts, all in the name Nathaniel West. Some dated before Josh and I even met. He'd been living 2 lives, at least. There was even a copy of an old lease, New York City, 2019, with a co-signer named Madeline Carr. That's when it really hit me. Madeline wasn't just the ex, she had been his partner, possibly in more ways than one. "I need to call her," I said. Kaya didn't stop me. This time, Madeline answered on the first ring. "You found it, didn't you?" I swallowed. "His passport. Nathaniel West." She exhaled, like she'd been holding that breath for years. "Yeah, that was the name he used with me too." I sank into Josh's Nathaniel's office chair, heart pounding. "Why would someone live under 2 names?" I asked. "What was he hiding?" She didn't answer right away. Then finally she said, "Look, I don't know everything. But I do know this. He changed jobs and cities every 2 to 3 years. Always said it was for better opportunities. But I started noticing things. Women showing up, asking questions, phone calls he wouldn't answer in front of me. One night, I found an envelope of cash and another ID under the bed. I shivered. Madeline kept going. I confronted him. He gaslit the hell out of me. Said I was paranoid, said I needed help. So I left. No warning, no note. Just packed up and ran. I've been waiting for the day someone else found me. That day was yesterday, Savannah. Everything inside me screamed this couldn't be real. But the proof was right in front of me. And then Kaya said something that made my stomach drop. "We should check the flash drive." I hesitated, but I nodded. She plugged it into Josh's laptop. At first, just folders. Dozens of them. Labeled with dates, locations, and random strings of letters and numbers. Then, Kaya clicked one. It opened a document titled Client Intake Form. And just like that, the air was sucked out of the room. Because it wasn't just financial records. It was names, addresses, private medical info, and notes on people. People who clearly never knew they were being watched. I don't know what I expected to find on that flash drive. Maybe emails to someone he was cheating with. Financial secrets. A second identity. What I didn't expect was this. Rows and rows of files. Each one with a name, birth date, sometimes a photo. Many with notes typed underneath divorcing. Assets unknown. Medical history, possible settlement coming. Spouse works, late check schedule. There were dozens. At first my brain couldn't even make sense of it. "What is this?" I asked, barely able to breathe. Kaya just stared at the screen, lips pressed into a hard line. Then she whispered, "These are case notes." I scrolled. The names weren't familiar. But the tone? Clinical. Cold. Calculated. Like he was building profiles for some kind of job. But what kind of job required this level of surveillance? "Do you think he was a private investigator?" I asked, trying to rationalize the horror. But Kaya shook her head. No PI would write it like this. "This feels..." She hesitated, then said it out loud. "Predatory." There was a folder labeled Archive at the bottom. I opened it. Inside were video files, security footage, parking lot cameras, cafes. One looked like it was filmed through a window. And then I saw a file labeled car_2019_final. My stomach flipped. I clicked it. It was Madeline. She was sitting on a park bench, looking down at her phone. The video was time-stamped. It ran for 5 minutes. He had followed her and recorded her, without her ever knowing. Kaya covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. The room tilted sideways, because this wasn't just some guy with commitment issues. This was a man who tracked people, watched them, collected data on them like they were projects. I slammed the laptop shut and sat back, heart racing. What the hell was he doing? Kaya's voice was barely above a whisper. I think he was gathering leverage on people, women, maybe clients, maybe victims. Victims. The word echoed through me, because suddenly, I wasn't heartbroken. I was scared. The man I almost married didn't just leave me at the altar. He left because I was getting too close. And if that was true, what would he do now that I knew? We backed up the flash drive, twice. Once to Kaya's cloud storage, once to a second USB. She'd pulled from her bag the kind she always carried for work presentations. I think we both knew this wasn't just about curiosity anymore. It was evidence. And evidence has a tendency to make dangerous people nervous. After locking everything back in the drawer for now, we left the townhouse. I couldn't stay there. Not when every room felt like it was still watching me, waiting for me to forget. The man I'd almost pledged my life to was a stranger, with a second name and a file system full of shadows. Kaya drove us back to her apartment, not saying much. I think we were both trying to make sense of it. Why the files? Why the aliases? What was he doing? I called Madeline again that night. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion underneath. He recorded me? She asked. In public? I told her about the video. The case files. The alternate name. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. When I left him, I thought I was just getting away from a narcissist, a manipulator. But this is different. What do you think he was doing? I asked. She hesitated. I think he's been blackmailing people, she said, or selling their information. There were a few times when I caught him meeting people who didn't seem like his normal clients. He said he did consulting work, but I never saw a single invoice. No website, no paperwork, just cash deposits and burner phones. Burner phones. I remembered a drawer in his nightstand where he kept old tech. He always said he was holding on to it just in case. I thought he was sentimental. Turns out I was just naive. Madeline continued. And Savannah. After I left, I moved twice. New city, new job. I blocked him everywhere. But sometimes I'd get this feeling like I was being watched. My apartment buzzer would go off at weird times, but no one would be there. I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. But one thing was clear now. Josh didn't just vanish because he was afraid of commitment. He ran because he knew his world was about to collapse. I tried calling him once, just to see if I could reach him. But the line rang and rang until it disconnected. His voicemail was full. I checked his Instagram. Deleted. Facebook. Gone. LinkedIn. Wiped clean. Email. Bounced back. Josh Miller or Nathaniel West had erased himself. And that's when I realized the full weight of what I was dealing with. This man hadn't just left me at the altar. He had disappeared without a trace. It was nearly midnight when Kaya and I started going through my photos. Not because we were trying to torture ourselves, but because we were trying to see, not Josh, but the edges of him. The moments between the moments. The pieces that never made sense until now. We scrolled through our engagement photos, pictures from vacations, Sunday morning selfies, and then Kaya paused on a photo I barely remembered taking. We were at a beachside cafe in Monterey. Josh was sitting across from me, reaching for my hand, smiling, but Kaya was staring at something behind him. Zoom in, she said. At first, I didn't see it, just a blurry shape. But as I pinched the screen, the shape sharpened into a man, sitting alone. Baseball cap, sunglasses, a camera bag at his feet, facing us. Not the ocean, not the view. Us. My stomach dropped. We flipped to the next photo. Different angle, but the same man. Farther back this time. Still watching. Kaya looked at me, eyes wide. That's not a tourist. That's surveillance. I flipped to another album photos from a work conference I attended last fall. Josh had joined me for the weekend. In one group shot, Kaya pointed again. There. Same guy. Different outfit. Same build. He was everywhere. Not just with me, but around me. Watching. Recording. Collecting. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in Kaya's guest bed, covers pulled to my chin, scrolling through every shared photo album, every iCloud backup, every memory I thought was mine alone. And over again, I saw him. Not always in focus, not always obvious, but present, which meant something I hadn't considered before. Josh wasn't just monitoring other people, he was monitoring me. Why? Was I part of a job? A mark? A cover? Was our entire relationship built on a lie? I tried to tell myself that wasn't possible. That the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching, the way he held me when I cried, the jokes only we understood, that had to be real, didn't it? But love can't survive under this kind of doubt. Not when you realize the person you trusted most may have been studying you. And then, the final blow. At 3:12 a.m., I got a text from a blocked number. You shouldn't have opened the drawer. No name, no punctuation, just that. And I knew. He was watching. Still. I stared at the text until the screen dimmed. You shouldn't have opened the drawer. No name, no emoji, nothing identifiable. But it didn't matter. I knew it was him. Josh. Nathaniel. Whoever he really was. He'd been silent for days. No calls. No emails. No sign of life. Until now. Until I did exactly what he didn't want looked. Kaya found me in the hallway, pacing, phone clutched in my hand like it might bite. He texted me, I said. She didn't ask who. She already knew. She read the message, then locked the apartment door behind us, double-checking it even though we lived on the 3rd floor. We need help, she said. I nodded. I was past the point of denial. Past fear, even. What I felt now was something sharper: resolve. The next morning, we went to the police. We told them everything. The fake identity, the surveillance files, the photos of the mystery man following us, and the threatening text. We handed over the flash drive, copies of the documents, even the passport. I expected raised eyebrows, skepticism, a polite brush-off. Instead, the officer who took our statement grew very, very quiet. He excused himself, came back 10 minutes later with a woman in plainclothes, Detective Moore. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. Miss Ellison, she said, can I speak with you privately? Kaya gave my hand a squeeze before I followed her into a side room. Moore closed the door, sat across from me, opened a slim manila folder. Do you know how many aliases your fiancé has used in the last 7 years? She asked. My mouth went dry. More than one? She gave me a look. Try 16. Across 5 states, all connected to short-term leases, temporary jobs, and most disturbingly, 3 ongoing fraud investigations. I couldn't speak. She continued. We've had our eyes on him for a while, but we didn't know his current alias until you walked in. I blinked. You're saying I just gave you his real location? Moore nodded. Until now, we didn't know who Josh Miller actually was. Your wedding announcement helped. And the flash drive? It ties him to at least 2 victims in another state, both filed reports. One involving blackmail, the other, identity theft. I felt sick. What was he doing? I whispered. Moore's face softened. Just slightly. We think he finds emotionally vulnerable women, moves quickly, gains their trust, and inserts himself into their lives. Sometimes for money, sometimes for access, sometimes for things we're still figuring out. My stomach turned, my chest felt hollow. So I was just, a mark? Moore didn't answer directly. But her silence was answer enough. I felt the room spinning around me. Not only had he lied, not only had he watched me, but I had unknowingly helped hide him, protected him, loved him. And now? Now I was the key to exposing him. Never thought I'd work with the police to trap my ex-fiancé. But then again, I never thought I'd find out he had 16 identities, a passport and a fake name, and surveillance footage of me. Detective Moore laid it out like a blueprint. They'd been circling him for over a year, watching as he moved from city to city, identity to identity, leaving just enough breadcrumbs to keep them guessing, but not enough to tie him down. Until me. Until my wedding. Until I walked into that precinct and opened the drawer he never thought I'd dare to touch. But there was one problem. Josh Nathaniel whatever had vanished again. Wiped his digital footprint. Changed phones. Shut down every trace. Except for that text. You shouldn't have opened the drawer. That text was a slip-up. It meant he hadn't gone far. And it meant we could use that. If I was willing. You want me to lure him out? I asked. Moore didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, but not alone. We'll control everything. Location, surveillance, extraction. We just need him to think you're still reachable. Still vulnerable. I swallowed. What if he doesn't take the bait? She paused. Then he's more afraid of exposure than we thought. Which is useful too. Kaya was livid when I told her. You're not a pawn in their operation. She snapped, pacing the living room. He already used you once. I'm not letting him do it again. I agreed. But I also knew this was my only way to take back the narrative. He stole my trust, my identity, my future. Now, I would steal his power. So I crafted the message. Simple, subtle, just vulnerable enough to feel real. I don't know what's happening. I shouldn't have looked. Just tell me what's true. I sent it from an anonymous number. The detectives provided one connected to a burner phone that would ping a controlled location. We waited. 1 day. Nothing. 2 days. Silence. On the 3rd day, at 107 a.m., he replied, "Meet me. No police. I'll explain everything. I never meant to hurt you." Attached was a pin. A coffee shop downtown. Closed hours earlier. More was ready in minutes. She set up a van a block away. Officers in plainclothes posted near exits. Surveillance running. A decoy seated near the door. I wouldn't be going in. I watched from the van, heart pounding, as the clock ticked past 2 a.m. Then he appeared. Ball cap, hoodie, head down. He looked smaller, thinner, paranoid. He looked nothing like the man who once picked out centerpieces for our wedding and kissed my knuckles every night before bed. He walked in, sat at the corner table, waited. He thought I'd come alone, vulnerable, begging for the version of him I used to love. Instead, he was surrounded. 3 minutes later, 2 officers approached from behind. He turned too late. They cuffed him. And I watched through the window as the man I almost married, almost built a life with, was read his rights. And all I felt was relief. The morning after his arrest, I stood in my kitchen holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The adrenaline had drained from my body like a wave receding after a storm, and what remained was silence. Not emptiness, just silence. A different kind. Clean. The news broke faster than I expected. Not front page, but tucked into the crime section of a few online outlets. Man arrested in multi-state fraud ring investigation. They didn't list all his aliases. They didn't mention me. But I knew the face in the blurry mugshot. The eyes. I stared at the article and felt nothing. No tears. No rage. No need to scream into a pillow or ask why me. Because I already knew the answer.